Oh, hello. I didn't see you come in. Set up lights, a camera, and a teleprompter. Look at me, say, "Are you ready?" Then say, "Action," and then wait for me to speak. Luckily, I assumed you did all of those things. So now I am speaking. And welcome to some more news. I'm a news dude, and news-wise, here's some more of it. It's been a bit over a month and a half since the Parkland mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, and we know it's important to wait a bit to get into the whole gun discussion, so as not to politicize the most recent event in which someone who shouldn't have had a gun and used it to kill many people with it. So we calculated the appropriate amount of time to wait between shootings, ignored some of the other shootings, and we're now ready to maybe bring up the idea of maybe politicizing a little bit the most recent event in which someone who shouldn't have had a gun and used it to shoot many people with it. So, breaking news. Since deciding to do that and filming this, there was another shooting. This time at not a school, so yay! There were several people injured. As of this filming, nobody has died, so yay. Except for the shooter, so And like every shooting, there was a torrent of false reports and assumptions spread by jerks. People wrongfully assuming it was another white man because the majority of mass shooters are white men, and people wrongfully claiming that the woman wearing a headscarf was Muslim because of racism. And details are still coming out about the shooter, although we're not going to share their face or name. A practice adopted by the Daily Wire and the Daily Wire's editor-in-chief, Ben Shapiro, and the Philip DeFranco Show, and the Philip DeFranco Show's Philip DeFranco. This is a good practice. As Shapiro points out, studies show that a desire for fame is growingly common in mass shooters due to media contagion. The study suggests a media pact to no longer share, reproduce, or retweet the names, faces, detailed histories, or long-winded statements of killers, so that we could see a dramatic reduction in mass shootings in 1 to 2 years. So we're going to do that too. And one thing we need to get out of the way is many things. Because whenever something like this happens, there's an active attempt to not actually talk about it. There's a series of empty arguments to avoid actually talking about gun control. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Even though studies show the presence of a gun makes it more likely that a person will kill himself or another person because guns were literally invented for the purpose of killing people. Another conversation stopper is, "But I'm a reasonable gun owner," as if that in any way assures anyone else is also a responsible gun owner. Or maybe they mentioned the strict gun laws of Chicago without thinking about the extremely lax gun laws in the state just down the road. Or maybe they'll say, it's our right as Americans to individually own guns for hunting and target practice. You know how the Second Amendment's not about the people's ability to defend themselves against tyranny, but rather to kill animals for fun? Or, barring that, it's a right to have, a little hobby? I like to do target practice, and it's my right to shoot at a thing that can't die with a hunk of delicately designed and intricately crafted interlocking metal pieces that cause a small explosion in my hand that propels a smaller piece of metal forward at incredible speeds for the purposes and efficient effect of killing what I point it at. For my little hobby. It's my right. Get out of here. Oh, another fun one is saying, well, cars kill people. Do you want to ban cars now? As if cars aren't heavily regulated and require a license to drive and also weren't invented for the sole purpose of killing people. Regulated. If only the Founding Fathers thought to include that word somewhere in the Bill of Rights. Oh well, the list goes on. But they, and points like it, are all designed to not have the conversation or take any action about the unavoidable specter of gun violence in America. So then, time goes by and another shooting happens, and everyone shares that one Onion article, and so on. And so forth. At this point, the right is so desperate to not talk about gun control, their main counter-argument has devolved into claiming that just saying do something or we want gun control isn't a policy. You have to actually suggest something, as if nobody has ever suggested anything. Ben, one of the only things you've suggested to help is to not retweet pictures of shooters' names and faces, which is a good idea. And yet, for this last shooting, you retweeted her face and name a couple of times throughout the day, man. Not to be the you had one job guy, but job-wise, there was only one. And you had it, Ben. You gave it to yourself. not to Ben Harpiro on this, but if you're worried about copycat shooters who want to get famous, maybe specifically don't tweet the name and face of the YouTube vlogger. Yes, there are a lot of ways to reduce gun violence that don't involve changing which weapons are allowed to be sold and to whom. But that and those don't preclude us from talking about what to do about guns specifically. Studies show that fewer guns means fewer gun deaths, and studies show that more guns doesn't equal fewer gun deaths. So maybe it's time to talk about it? This tactic to avoid the gun control talk usually works. Eventually, the cycle continues. But not this time, because over the past, since the Parkland shooting, many of the students have become regulation advocates, confronting politicians and Second Amendment defenders / misunderstanders, and leading protests. And boy, do people hate these fucking kids. Oh man, wow. The Parkland teens, or as Marco Rubio probably calls them at home, the snarkland means, are the talk of the very mad town. Despite the teens advocating for a wide range of proposals to keep them from not getting shot at, a lot of people seem to think that they're trying to take away everyone's Second Amendment rights, which they've never said they want to do. These punks, these bullies.
I think David Hogg is a bully.
No, wait. It's not bullying to criticize people in power. It's not bullying to be mean to people in power. Bullying is about people in power, with real power, intimidating those weaker than them. What's bullying? Some kids are mean to politicians? Or a media personality on the most watched and only president-approved news channel makes fun of a kid for not getting into college? You think it's bullying to publicly and aggressively pressure politicians? Are you a politician? It's not bullying, it's holding people in power accountable because they don't do it themselves. Since we're talking about constitutional amendments, did you know one of the first proposed wasn't ratified for more than 2.5 centuries? That amendment, recently ratified, stops Congress from giving itself a raise. They suck, and they're powerful. You can't bully them. So maybe these kids aren't bullies. Maybe you just hate them because normally gun control debates, pardon the language, die off after a few days. But because of these teens, we're forced to keep having it. And you don't want to. So you just have to, call them Hitler.
I am not comparing David Hogg to Hitler Youth at all. No comparison other than the hand and the armband.
Yes, that famous Hitler salute, holding a fist in the air.
And the gun control. That's the...
Oh, well, yeah.
Hell yeah. When I think gun control that many countries have, I think Nazis.
The likely socialism.
The likely socialism? First of all, the kids only ever talked about gun control, which isn't socialist. Are you assuming he's a likely socialist because kids these days want universal health care? Do you think universal health care is a sign of Nazism? I know Hitler used socialist talking points and programs in order to gain power and then do all that Nazi stuff, but you don't really think Nazis were socialists, do you? Oh, you do? You have articles and other videos on your site about how the Nazis were liberal socialists? Are we really doing this right now? Okay. It's the Nazi stuff people are mad at the Nazis for, right? And should I just say historians disagree with you and move on? Hey, you know what country has socialized medicine and isn't run by Nazis? Current day Germany. I can't believe I spent this much time on Hitler. Why do we have to talk about Hitler so much these days? God damn it. Sorry. Crowder, go on. How else is David Hogg like a Nazi?
And the policies that you're proposing, which by the way strip other people of their fundamental human rights.
Now, wait a minute. Your fundamental human right of what? Individual ownership of a gun? This is what I'm talking about. It's something you say to stop the conversation. People say this all the time to shut it down. They refer to their God-given right, which I guess brings us to a segment we like to call your God-given right to own a piece of delicately designed and intricately crafted interlocking metal pieces that cause a small explosion in your hand that propels a smaller piece of metal forward at incredible speeds for the purposes and efficient effect of killing what you pointed at. Your God sucks. End of segment. But let's bring it home. What's the last way David Hogg is like Hitler?
In the overall demure stature with distinct lack of jawline and general malfeasance.
His general malfeasance reminds you of Hitler's general malfeasance? Right on, dude. Or wrong on.
They have accused everyone of being a Nazi for so long, including yours truly.
The boy who cried Nazi, if you will. But that's a parody of a children's book, you see. The boy can cry Nazi at every person he encounters all he wants, because we have history books to know what Nazis are and think and did. Or at least, a lot of us do. I don't want to talk about Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro so much, actually, either. I really don't. But they're loud voices in this conversation and often dishonest. And Ben is uniquely positioned in the national gun debate because while the gun control Parkland teens were accused of being crisis actors and manipulated by the media to push their agenda and told what to say, Ben has been coaching and helping pro-Second Amendment advocate Kyle Kashuv, who could not be here today because we don't have guests. So Ben is coaching him, which is fine. Being in the public spotlight and articulating your opinions is hard, and these kids deserve to be heard and helped. And I don't want to bully Ben. I think we'd actually probably get along. We both play music, we both talk at people for a living, we both have held a gun. But now, Ben is embedded in this national conversation, and many of his tactics are to not have the conversation. He wrote a book, or really more like a pamphlet, How to Destroy a Leftist. And aside from the fact that the main example of leftist he uses is Piers Morgan, okay, Ben. The majority of this book isn't about how to debate or present a convincing argument or be honest. It's about how to frame the debate and how to trip people up so they look foolish and then the conversation can stop. It's a book about how to stop conversations. But setting aside all the deflections and dishonest arguments and gun don't kill people-isms, what people like Ben and these other students are talking about is the Second Amendment and how gun control infringes on our Second Amendment rights. But rights are regulated, It's why there are libel laws and rules in advertising and why you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. It's why the Parkland students now have to wear clear backpacks, which seems like a Fourth Amendment issue. The idea of gun regulation isn't automatically infringing on your Second Amendment rights. Of every single amendment, the second one is the only one with regulated in the text. The original draft mentioned well-regulated militias in the middle, but they decided to make the sentence structure more awkward in order to mention well-regulated militias as soon as possible. The notion that individual gun ownership is a right isn't in the Constitution, and it's actually a relatively new idea as a legal concept. As of 1888, when law review articles started being indexed, every single one agreed that the Second Amendment doesn't guarantee the individual right to own a gun. This was the consensus for more than 2 centuries after the Constitution was written. Before then, the Federalist Papers, notes on the Constitutional Convention, they all debate the idea and logistics of militias. For example, how often militias, which are necessary for the security of a free state, should meet, and so on. But they don't mention individual rights to own a gun. But certain quotes can be taken out of context, as noted in the Pulitzer Prize-winning book Original Meanings by historian Jack Rakove. For example, Patrick Henry once said, "The great object is that every man be armed." Except the rest of the quote is, "At a very great cost, we shall be doubly armed," because he was talking about fiscal responsibility and complaining about both the federal and state government paying to arm the militias. This idea of individual gun ownership especially took hold in the 1970s, when the NRA, which originally only promoted gun safety and training and regulation, was taken over basically in the dark of night and started focusing the group on lobbying Congress and promoting gun sales and pushing for individual gun rights. They post videos about how people are taking away your guns so gun sales go up, all because the NRA started erasing key parts of the Second Amendment they claim to defend. In the NRA's headquarters lobby, where they display the Second Amendment, or no, sorry, just the last part. They skipped the first words. One of them is regulated. So this decades-long campaign to change what the Second Amendment means, after centuries of it meaning something else, culminated in Columbia versus Heller, a case from less than 10 years ago brought forth by libertarian lawyers in the only Second Amendment case in American history that promoted individual gun rights. Antonin Scalia, retire bitch Scalia, wrote that guns are legal for individuals in common use to protect hearth and home, which is a weird fucking way to say for the people in a well-regulated militia. You fucking stupid judge. During the press conference after the ruling, one could apparently see posters behind Heller reading, "Let every man be armed." You know, that out-of-context quote about fiscal responsibility of well-regulated militias. If the NRA really believed in defending the Second Amendment right of individual gun ownership, which isn't in the Second Amendment, maybe they should vocally defend people like Philando Castile, who legally owned a gun, informed an officer that he had one, reached for his license and registration like you do when your car's pulled over, and then shot dead by the police. Instead, after many weeks, the NRA said that Philando's death was a tragedy, didn't mention the Second Amendment, and then later Dana Lash tweeted, well, Philando had weed on him. So, and see ya. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching that video about all that stuff. If you liked it, like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTube things. We have a podcast called Even More News on iTunes and Google Play. And if you want more of these videos more often, support us on Patreon. The link is in the description. There's so many things in the description. Check it out. Aw.